You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network, under the Rocky Mountain Rooftop banner. I am your host, Skyler Timmons, and you'll notice I am all by myself today for this week's episode. Unfortunately, Evan Lang, my regular co-host, came down with a little case of pneumonia, and he's not feeling too good and everything. So we weren't going to do an episode this week. But then the Rockies went ahead and made a move and brought about some news. And so we figured, why not do a solo show, try to talk it over. Unfortunately, I couldn't get anybody else to join me. Brother is busy. And so you'll have to wait for every Rocky ever to show up. And some others fell through, weren't able to catch them. So unfortunately, it's just me for this episode, which means it's probably going to be a little shorter this time around. But at least we've done this before. So you're at least maybe a little accustomed to it. And hey, friend of the show, Patrick Lyons, does this by himself all the time. So does Paul Holden, our friend, doing episodes all on their own. So, hey, it's just me, and we can get through this. But it's the offseason. As we hop right into it, offseason time, it's going to be a lot of discussion about what teams do. There's a lot of news about options and contract discussions. When free agency officially hits in a little bit. Well, I guess it's underway right now. But a lot of options and other decisions being made. There's a timeline of a lot of other events, tender deadlines near the end of the month in a couple of weeks. All those things, 40 roster, all that stuff is coming up in the coming weeks. So there's a lot that teams have to figure out what to do over these next couple of weeks. And we're going to start seeing the slow rollout of trades. We've already seen a couple of little small ones. But for the Rockies, they made their first move here on Saturday afternoon. This is when we are recording. So when you hear this on Monday, we'll see if they do anything else before then. But the Rockies have acquired utility infielder Owen Miller from the Milwaukee Brewers in exchange for cash consideration. So a little exchange of moolah, cheddar cheese, ends up being the transaction to bring over the utility man for Miller. Miller, originally drafted by the Padres back in 2018 by the San Diego Padres. Spent a couple of years there, and then in 2020 was sent over to the Cleveland Guardians. I guess they were the Indians at that time. Sent over to Cleveland in a big package that brought over Greg Allen and Mike Clevenger. That was the deal. So Miller, along with current Rocky Cal Quantrill, were included in that trade package from San Diego, shipped over to Cleveland, where he then made his major league debut in 2021. So that's the little bit of the timeline. And then he spent parts of 4 seasons, 2 in Cleveland, and then these last 2 in Milwaukee. So not a very long big league career thus far, which is pretty interesting. I heard the name. I didn't realize that he still hasn't played around as much as maybe I thought he did. But 4 seasons in the bigs. He's played a total of 294 over 4 seasons, a little over 1,000 plate appearances. So his playing time really hasn't been in a starting role at the big league level. 60 games in 2021, had a 204 batting average, had a 551 OPS. Next year in 2022 with Cleveland, probably the best year of his career thus far, overall across the board, just in terms of actual playing time. 22 game, or at the age of 25 in 2022, played in 130 games. He had about 108 starts for the Guardians that year. 472 plate appearances. He had 103 hits, 26 doubles, had a triple, 6 home runs. That was a career high. 51 RBIs was a career high. 93 strikeouts, 32 walks. That was a career high. 243 average, 301 on base, 351 slugging, and then a 652 OPS. So across the board, not a terrible year. A 0.3 R WAR is what he was worth that year. Not terrible across the board. Like you'll take those numbers for a guy that's coming off the bench or just kind of that utility infielder role. Not too shabby at all across the board for Owen Miller. After that season, he gets shipped over to Milwaukee, and not a whole lot. With Milwaukee in 2023, plays 90 games, hits 261, 303, 371. That's a career high slash line, a 674 OPS, best of his big league career. He had 5 home runs, 27 RBIs, 13 stolen bases. That was a career high. 61 strikeouts, 17 walks, 17 doubles, a 0.4 WAR that season for him. So again, not terrible. That utility guy that can kind of bounce around in the infield. We'll touch on his defense in a second. But he's getting the job done. He's contributing in some factor. It's not egregiously terrible, which that's really all you can ask for from most any player that's on your roster. 2024 only plays in 14 games past season. Not really sure why exactly, but it just didn't work out for him this season. In that brief 14 games, he got optioned early on. He didn't start the season, started the season down in AAA, gets called up around mid-April, plays for a couple of weeks, and then send him for a week, then they send him down. He's just bouncing back and forth through May. And then it's in July. In July, they outright him off the 40-man roster to AAA where he finishes the season. But 14 games, he had 8 strikeouts, no walks, .185 batting average on base percentage, 222 on OPS, or 222 slugging, 407 OPS, 5 hits, 1 double, 3 RBIs, 27 at bats, 27 plate appearances. Really nothing doing for Miller in 2024. And part of that could have been the rise of some of the other young guys that Pat Murphy was deploying in that infield. You can look at the Brewers last season. Not a lot of room for an underperforming 27-year-old. You had Bryce Terang, 24-year-old over at second base. He had a great year, or a really solid year, and he's really good defensively. Willie Adames is at shortstop. Really good year. He's a free agent now. We're going to be a free agent, but still a really good year for him. Joey Ortiz stormed onto the scene, had a fantastic rookie season. So the Brewers transitioning to a younger group of guys that performed much better. Rhys Hoskins was over at first base. Didn't have a great year across the board, but still put up 26 bombs, second on the team. You'll take that. That prime slugger that they needed. Unfortunately, and then you had a lot of other young guys that got time. Oliver Dunn, Jake Bauer split time at first base. You had Andrew Monasterio. He got plenty of time. Tyler Black saw some action. Owen Miller, just there's no room for him anymore. He was out of options. Brewers needed room on that 40-man roster. So they designate for him for assignment, send him to AAA. Has a really good year in AAA overall in 90 games. Wasn't bad. In 90 games with the Nashville Sounds, had 276 average, a 392 slugging, 354 on base, 5 homers, 37 RBIs. Not terrible. Good solid year off the bench. But again, it's that thing of there's just no room for him on a Brewers team that went to the playoffs, had a good year, probably has their, has the manager of the year candidate in Pat Murphy. Miller just gets squeezed out. It's just the nature of the game. 27 years old, there's really no place for him and no future there as they move on to other things. Now for the Rockies, it helps pad their infield depth. And Miller can play pretty much anywhere on the field. He's done everything except catcher and center field. Primary has played second base and first base, two spots that are generally thin for the Rockies. Right now, we're penciling in Michael Toglia as the opening day starting first baseman. Chris Bryant can play first, but he'll probably be the DH. Elehuris Montero, he's not on the 40-man. There's not a whole lot of depth at that position at the quarter infield. So you add in Miller, who can also play second base, play that a lot. If something happens with Brendan Rodgers, you can turn to Miller and say, well, go for it. We know you have experience. Maybe they're a little hesitant to pencil in Aaron Schunk as your middle infielder bench piece. Maybe they're not confident yet in that, and they want to give him opportunity to continue to grow. But that's where the competition is. They're still kind of thin at the top of bench guys and depth pieces for that middle infield. Because right now it's Adiel Amador as maybe your top second baseman. Ryan Ritter can play second base. He's down in the Arizona Fall League. Beyond them, it becomes a little more scarce. And there are definitely options that the Rockies should give a look to of prospects and other younger guys, and continue to look at the free agent market that we'll touch on a little later. But he helps at least pad it. He's not on the 40-man, so you don't have to give him a spot. Invite him into spring training, give him a look, and give him a chance to really work on those things, and hopefully give some competition. And, he's there if you need him. Hopefully they won't need him, but he'll be there if they need him. And that's really all you can ask for. And the Rockies want to extend that bench with a veteran piece. And Miller has proven, when given some extended looks, can contribute off the bench, either as a late game defensive replacement, late game at bat. He doesn't strike out a ton. He's got a below league average strikeout rate in his career, around 21%. League average is 22. So splitting hairs, but it is less. Doesn't walk a ton, but walks enough. He's not going to bring you power, though. Maybe he is a little more prone to the ground ball. Really fits a Rockies mold. In all sense, he's Alan Trejo again. He's Alan Trejo who can play first base. And even then, I think Trejo's been learning some first base somewhere. Or he was doing it with the Dodgers a little bit. So he fits a mold that we have seen time and time again with the Rockies. It's going to be nothing new. That's what we've come to expect from the Rockies. And so is this move surprising? No. And for just a cash deal, it's not that bad. Now, cash considerations, it's basically a free player. If you don't like him, you're done. You get rid of him. It's not a huge gamble. Now, is this the type of move that we expect the Rockies to make and only make this offseason? Yeah, unfortunately, it kind of fits their modus operandum. That's what they're going to do. They're going to go for these cheap deals in trades and in minor league deals, see what they can do in spring training. But they cannot put preference or even expect to pencil him as, okay, he is going to be on our bench opening day, locked in. No, he's still got to earn his spot. He has not proven it at the big league level that he deserves a spot. It's been inconsistent. If it's him to help protect younger guys to get more playing time, that's great. But there are other options. He is not better than a lot of the other options. He's not better than really any of the options the Rockies have as infield depth that could get big league time on the bench. I think of Greg Jones. He's played a little bit of second base, but he can play pretty much all the infield except first. Can play the outfield. Rockies only gave him a little bit of a look last season. I want him to get a look. I want Aaron Schunk to get the look. Hopefully that's what the plan is, and Miller's just kind of just an extra depth piece. Stash him there in AAA Albuquerque. Let him work on some things, build up some offensive confidence. If you need him, he's there. But the hope is you don't need him. He's that break glass in case of emergency type of player, and that's all we really need. But yeah, this ran a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but yeah, some thoughts. Rockies acquiring Owen Miller. We'll see what they do with that. But we'll take a quick break here on Affected by Altitude and come back. Talk some more offseason stuff, baby. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. Skyler Timmons here with you this afternoon, or no, this isn't live, so you're just listening to whenever. It's afternoon for me when I'm recording this. But we talk about the Rockies' first trade of the offseason, Owen Miller. What could come next? Now, there are a lot of names that'll be on the board. Are the Rockies going to be in on many? Probably not. And all things considered, probably not. No, Juan Soto obviously is the top target in free agency. And even though in an interview he's like, "Oh, I'm open and available to all 30 teams," well, we specialize in sniffing out grade A baloney on this podcast. No, we call it out a lot. But yeah, I can guarantee you one team that will not be in on Juan Soto, and they play in Colorado. Juan Soto is going to look for a record-breaking deal. That is going to be something way out of the Rockies' price range, comfort zone. It ain't happening. As much as we want it to, much as I would love to have Juan Soto, that ain't happening. So we have to be a little more realistic and look at the available free agent market for the Rockies. And mostly what we know, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what the Rockies are looking for or what they want to do when it comes to the free agent market. We know really it's two things that they want right now. Another veteran bullpen arm to pair with Tyler Kinley. That's kind of what we can expect. And perhaps really a veteran bat. Now, that could come in a form of a bench piece, or it could be a regular to swipe into the lineup a little more often. We're not sure. But really, those are the two things Rockies are looking for. And then it's going to be a lot of depth building, replacing depth pieces. They're always going to be a little lookout for depth pitching, all that kind of stuff, and building up things to see, okay, what can we do in spring training to really get guys going and to build our roster. So that's kind of what the Rockies' agenda is going to be going into this offseason. Not a lot happening. From what it sounds like, don't expect much. But still, there are a lot of options the Rockies could go for this offseason. There's constantly updating as options change. There's going to be an even bigger influx when non-tenders happen, things of that nature. A lot of things. But first, let's look back. Let's look at relief pitching. Now, if the Rockies want to add a veteran arm, there's going to be a lot of options. The good ones, it's a saturated market, and so that makes it more difficult. Are we going to be able to get a good arm, or are we just going to get an arm? Because Daniel Bard is now a free agent, and there is no chance the Rockies are. Well, at least we hope there's no chance they bring him back. And you're 40 years old, coming off of Tommy John, bad 2 years, wasn't good, hasn't really been good since the 2022 deadline. We assume he's gone. That's kind of the assumption, that he is gone for the 2025 season. Daniel Bard, bye-bye. That leaves a lot of options still if they want to go route. Hey, they could go a lot of routes to to bring back some old friends. Carlos Estevez, I think, would be that top option. That's a familiar face, a veteran that could realistically slide in as the closer for the team. They say, "Oh, we're not necessarily looking for a closer. You need a closer." Seth Halverson, Victor Vodnik, some of those guys have the stuff, but it's something that I think they still need to get eased into a little bit for the big league level. You can definitely give them those opportunities later in games, have them pitch the 7th and the 8th inning. But for the time being, for this team right now, look for a guy who can close the door to just really help the team in general. In the course of rebuilding, I think wins go a long way to help. And a big part of the Rockies' failures in 2024 was that they struggled late in the game. We saw Justin Lawrence struggle. saw Jalen Beek struggle. A lot of ninth inning collapses, ninth inning collapses. And so I think Carlos Estevez could be one they look to. Now, he's probably going to be one of the more premier closers on the market, could get a healthy deal. He's 32 years old, could bump that up, get a solid 3-year deal even. That's not terrible, but it's worth giving a look. There's also Jeff Hoffman. He had a really good year in Philadelphia. I don't think he'd want to come back to Colorado, though. So we can probably mark him off. But you can look through, and they have 2 ways they can go about this. If they want to get that veteran reliever arm, you can go for recent success and effectiveness. So that would be your Tanner Scotts, your Jeff Hoffmans, Carlos Estevez, those type of guys, the premier guys. You go for the has-beens, which would include like a Craig Kimbrell, guys that were once good, but they're getting older. Get those kind of guys. Or you just kind of go in that middle of the market. He's not terrible. He's okay. Had a decent year. Not the best, but we can get him cheap. That's probably going to be the route the Rockies go. Now, there's still some intriguing arms that maybe fit into that category. Drew Smyly just became a free agent. Now there's Carl Edwards Jr., there's Andrew Kittredge, Matt Barnes, Adam Ottavino, Brian Shaw, Justin Wilson, Jacob Barnes, Tim Hill. There are a lot of options that they could go to look at. Sir Anthony Dominguez, Kendall Graveman, Giovanni Gallegos, Amir Garrett, Tyler Matzik, Jake Diekman, Adam Simber, Jorge Lopez. There are a ton of options that the Rockies could go get that would probably come relatively cheap. Not expected, but they can slot into that middle, the bullpen middle reliever, guys that can assist and help. You want to have a guy that can help mentor your younger guys in that bullpen, but also perform on the field. So you don't necessarily want a terrible guy that's not going to really influence. Because when I think of mentor, I want a guy who's had success, not a guy who's really trying to figure it out. And so there's plenty of options the Rockies could go for. I think Estevez would be top of my list. Just he's familiar, but he's also like pretty good still. He always had the tools, and I think he got refined over in Los Angeles. Philadelphia helped him. That could be something the Rockies need back. A blazing fastball guy that can get strikeouts. Be pretty good. Bench piece or a veteran bat, that's always a crapshoot. Who knows what they're looking for? There are options out there, but it's hard to determine exactly what. For me, if I want to go out and get a bat, I'm going for Anthony Santander. Switch hitter, had a phenomenal year in Baltimore this year. Put up a record in home runs, that stuff. Switching powerhouse. Not sure how great his defense is, but as a hitter, you couldn't ask for more. Couldn't ask for better than Anthony Santander. Well, you could. His name's Juan Soto, but he's not happening. But he's 30 years old, had a 5.9 WAR last season. A good bat. There's some other options in there. Hassan Kim is now a free agent. He would be an interesting one, but he's more or less just, it would be a repeat after Brendan Rodgers, who basically performed the same as he did this year. Anthony Rizzo is available. Paul Goldschmidt. Pete Alonso. That would be an interesting one. He's going to be a premier bat that a lot of teams are going after. But could you imagine Pete Alonso hitting at Coors Field for 80 games a year? We say that a lot. People say that a lot about free agents, hitters, and the Rockies. But Pete Alonso actually is like a guy where you actually can say that and be like, I could see it. Like he could maybe easily put up 50 bombs at Coors Field. Who knows? It probably wouldn't happen, and he'd end up having a career low in every category known to the sun. But there's a lot of things you can like about different guys, but it's a thin market. And are any of these guys worth the money or the difference than what you already have in-house? The Rockies are rebuilding, whether they acknowledge it or not. It's not a reconstruction like they like to say. They are, in a sense, trying to rebuild in segments. Their payroll is tied up in underperforming veterans like Chris Bryant, and then a lot of that pitching staff. No, those starters, Herman Marquez, Kyle Freeland, Antonio Senzatella, they haven't performed to the level that they're getting paid. Ryan McMahon is in that same category. You've got other guys that Rockies will try to spend some money on. And that's what I want to touch on here in these last couple of minutes is Patrick Saunders of the Denver Post writing about this, really about the Rockies' problems with money, where it's okay to have a lower payroll right now. But in all honesty, they have to get better going forward. And it's not that the Rockies are cheap. In some aspects, they are. But in all seriousness, the Rockies have spent money over the last several years. The problem is they have spent it so incredibly poorly. Case in point, the Chris Bryant contract, a bloated, overpriced contract that everybody knew was not good, but Dick Monfort wanting a quote-unquote aircraft carrier, a franchise icon, trying to recoup losses from the Nolan Arenado trade, which is so incredibly terrible, spends that money on a bloated contract for a player in obvious decline for 7 years, handcuffing the team of what they could have done with that money. Instead, he wanted to try and save face, and that's not. It was a move of desperation rather than innovation, as I always like to say. So they've handcuffed them. They're tied up in these bad contracts, these loyalty contracts. $13 million to Charlie Blackmon in 2024. As much as we love Charlie Blackmon, we always knew that is overpriced. He did not need to earn that much. You could have signed him to something cheaper, less but double digits because of his loyalty to the franchise. Okay, yeah, but did you really need to spend that money? Daniel Bard extension was not good. You got maybe half of a season out of him in 2023 and then didn't pitch at all in 2024. Yeah, not a good use of money for about $18-19 million over 2 years that could have gone to something else. And so that's why you have to see, we have to cut payroll because we're tied up money in these other guys. And so that's where you can still work on a lower payroll, but you have to be wiser with your money in general. There's ways to do that. It's these smarter one-term year deals or shorter term deals with maybe some veteran guys who can be on a higher annual value, but it's a shorter amount of time. So it's things. And Patrick Saunders had a really interesting thing where the Rockies were in payroll about 17th in the league last year at $147 million. Lost obvious money with the TV revenue. We don't know exactly what their revenue was from TV deal, but we expect it to be lower. But Patrick Saunders predicts the Rockies will probably be 20th out of 30th in payroll. But what's interesting is here's that breakdown of they spent roughly $2.41 million per victory for their 61-101 record, the 14th highest in the majors. Not surprisingly, the Mets ranked number one. Their $317.8 million payroll resulted in an 89-73 record and a spot in the NLCS. The Mets spent $3.57 million per win. So they had a huge payroll, ended up making the playoffs. But then you had other teams like the Royals, $1.42 million per win, Milwaukee, $1.24 million per win, Baltimore, $1.21 million, Cleveland, $1.16 million, and Detroit 1.15. All of them spent less, had more wins, made the postseason, lower payrolls, homegrown talent with some superstars on their teams. The Rockies don't have that. They have to stop making dumb decisions with their money. And that's why you have to surround yourself with smart baseball people who know how to spend that money. It's not always, well, we need to spend money because that's what you do to get players. No, you spend money to get good players. And then you can only really get away with the cheaper deals, the wiser deals, because you're smart in-house and know how to develop and get the most value out of the deals you're signing. Randall Grichuk was for the Arizona Diamondbacks this year. Had a phenomenal year. Signed for a rather cheap deal, had a couple of incentives, but a really cheap year this year. It was a bargain year for him. He put up a phenomenal year as a platoon player who held his own, regardless of the platoon advantage, but they mainly used him against lefties. Turn in a phenomenal year. Declines his option. He's a free agent. He's set up for a decent payday by a team. It's because the Diamondbacks were able to help him develop. They were able to help him develop at the big league level on this cheap deal, used him in a way to set him up for success. So then their money worked out. And then they're okay with letting him go because they have the tools needed to make the most of the money they do spend. The Rockies have proven they cannot make the most of their bargains or their deals in general. They spent $27 million on the pedigree, $27 million a year on the pedigree of Kris Bryant, the prospect of what he could be or what he had been in the past, instead of looking at him and say, hey, this is what we spend on you and this is how we're going to help you achieve that. They're stuck in the water with a lot of these guys. They threw the money at Ryan McMahon. He has stagnated. He is stagnant. He's plateaued where he is. We know who he is, and yet we're still stuck with him for a couple more years at a high cost. Same with Freeland. Senzatello, we saw what they could do, but then we didn't help them achieve what they could be. And we're paying the price. You got to be smarter with your money, and the Rockies have not proven that. It's going to take, you can spend cheaply. In a sense, you can look for bargains. You don't have to blow out of the water. Like, it's not all the teams are the Dodgers. They can't all outspend everybody else. So the Rockies have to get wiser. Look at the numbers, learn how to develop guys so then they can look at the board and say, we can get this guy for cheap, but this is how we could make him better so that he's worth more than what we paid. That's where the bargain is. And they have yet to prove that they can do that. So we'll see. It's going to be a long off season, but we'll be here on Affected by Altitude. Talk about it all along the way. Appreciate you tuning in with me for this episode, Solo Act. We'll have Evan back again, hopefully next time when he gets over his pneumonia. And we'll try to get some other folks throughout the offseason, but we appreciate you tuning in for your support. We're going to have some fun. We'll have awards coming up sometime soon. We'll have our annual award show again and look to have some fun with that. But you can find me over at purplerow.com and fansfirstsports.com, writing MLB news over Fans First, but writing Wednesday Rock Piles at Purple Row, writing Rockies and other news articles for Fans First. Sportsnetwork.com. You can find us over on Twitter at ROCKYMTN Rooftop, as well as on YouTube, Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow along on your favorite platforms, give us ratings, all that good stuff to help continue to support the show as we continue to just try and grow this thing that we love doing. But we appreciate all that you do. You can find me over at @sideline_crowd on Twitter, and also be on the lookout for Every Rocky Ever, our Rockies podcast, where myself and my brother Dustin go through every Rocky ever in different episodes. The most recent one that was put out was talking about Jonathan Lucroy and Yori Torrealba. We'll hopefully have another one here soon in the offseason so we continue to have some fun. But appreciate your time tuning in. Until next time, this has been Skyler Timmons on Affected by Altitude. Farewell. This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.